Good evening, everybody. It's James coming on for a live stream. Not impromptu. I've been planning this one all day. Trying a little bit different setup here in the Freightliner Cascadia. Hopefully it looks okay, lighting-wise. It's dark outside, so we don't have government money here. We have trucker money here, so this is what we get. So I want to talk about a topic when I decide when I want to teach on something. When I pick a topic, I have a choice to make. Do I want to put it together into like a long form kind of thing, an hour-long teaching kind of thing, and present it to my local congregation? Or do I want to live stream it and make it sometimes shorter, 20, 30 minutes? Occasionally I'll go long form. I've had 3-hour live streams. But the idea is it something where I want to target it towards people I know personally, people I walk with personally, and the online community is secondary? It's how a lot of them are. Or is it something where I feel like the actual topic needs more reach? Because the average live stream here on Facebook gets around 200 views, give or take. The average upload on the Three Measures Ministry YouTube is around 30 views. So this is kind of one of those topics where I feel like needs more reach. So this is why I'm doing it the live stream as opposed to a congregational teaching like I originally intended to do with this. So let's talk about, there's a couple ideas we're exploring here and they're connected. The idea of Second Passover and the idea of double dipping. What do I mean by double dipping? If you've been doing this whole Torah thing for any measure of time, you've either done this yourself or you've encountered someone else has done it. You keep a feast twice. Okay, usually this is because of the calendar, because of our calendar variances of opinion. A lot of years we have people keeping the feasts a month apart. Some will start their year in March, some will start the year in April, so you end up with 2 of everything. And some people will do both. They'll do Passover at their local congregation maybe in month 1, and then maybe month 2 comes around, and the other congregation locally that's on a different calendar is doing Passover, so they'll go to that one too. Or maybe they'll do the feast twice. Sukkot, tabernacles. It could be anything. That's double dipping. And we're going to talk about that, and that's kind of what I want to focus on, but I'm using Second Passover to kind of set up my ideas on double dipping. So I got 3 instances of scripture that we're going to read here to kind of make the case for this. Let's start off reading Numbers chapter 9. This is where we get into Second Passover, okay? Thus Yahweh spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the 1st month of the 2nd year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Now let the sons of Israel observe the Passover at its appointed time, which he already told us back in Exodus that was in the 1st month, right? That's its appointed time, the 14th day of the 1st month. On the 14th day of this month, at twilight, you shall observe it at its appointed time. You shall observe it according to all its statutes and according to all its ordinances. This is going to be a key idea here as we get into how accurately can we keep a holy day. So Moses told the sons of Israel to observe the Passover. They observed the Passover in the 1st month on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the wilderness of Sinai. According to all that Yahweh had commanded Moses, so the sons of Israel did. But there were some who were unclean because of a dead person, so that they could not observe Passover on that day. So they came before Moses and Aaron on that day. Okay? Now this is interesting because when you look at the actual Passover commandment, there's nothing that says you have to be clean. Okay? However, we know that they're going to be processing meat, and if they are unclean processing meat, that meat is also unclean. So we have a problem here. Okay? Verse 7, those men said to him, Though we are unclean because of a dead person, why are we restrained from presenting the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time among the sons of Israel? Good question. They want to do the right thing. They want to do Passover, but they're not able to because they are defiled. Okay? So this is a problem in need of a solution. What's our solution? Moses therefore said to them, Wait, and I will listen to what Yahweh will command concerning you. Then Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, verse 10, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, If any one of you or your generations becomes unclean because of a dead person or is on a distant journey, he may, however, observe the Passover to Yahweh. In the second month, on the 14th day at twilight, they shall observe it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. They shall eat none of it until morning, nor break a bone of it. According to all the statute of the Passover, they shall observe it. Okay, so he actually expanded upon the reason for allowing a second Passover. Not just because you're unclean because you touched a dead carcass, a dead person. You can also be on a long journey. Now, it doesn't spell this out, but something triggered Yahweh to connect the idea of being on a long journey with touching a dead person. Okay? And my wife is the first person that I'm aware of that kind of put these two together. And it makes logical sense to me. The idea that if you have a relative who lives a distance away and you go to bury them or memorialize them or however it is, take care of that, and then you have to come back. You're on a long journey because of the dead person. You can't control when someone dies, right? Unless you're a murderer, right? For the rest of us who don't murder people, we have no say over when somebody dies. So it's beyond our control that these people have to go somewhere to take care of a dead loved one, okay, and then come back and miss the first Passover because of that. So Yahweh isn't just saying, like, you know, you touched a dead carcass locally. He's already looking ahead to provisions for when they spread out and they start to obtain more territory, and now they've got more distance to cover when they're actually taking care of dead family members. So to me, that makes the most sense on why he would actually put the two together here. But here's the thing. Let's keep going. Verse 13, but the man who is clean and is not on a journey, and yet neglects to observe the Passover, that person shall then be cut off from his people, for he did not present the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time. That man will bear his sin. If a stranger sojourns among you and observes the Passover to Yahweh according to the statute of the Passover, and according to its ordinance he shall do, you shall have one statute both for the stranger and for the native of the land. So if you are in town, so to speak, and you are able to keep the Passover, and you don't, not good. Not good. So what does this teach us? This teaches us that Yahweh is merciful. He looks at our affliction, he looks at our plights, and within reason, he will make accommodations. We've already got a setup here for the idea that he doesn't dogmatically insist on absolute perfection. He understands that life happens. Okay? We don't serve a tyrant. So this is where we get the idea of second Passover from. Now notice, did he make provision for if you keep Passover in the first month, but you want to also keep it in the second month, go ahead and do it twice? No. There's a very specific reason for doing it in the second month. You were not able to in the first month. So it's an either-or setup. You either do it in the first month if you're able, or the second month if you're not able. Period. So this is where we get into the double dipping thing. Okay? There's no provision for the second Passover to count as a double dip. So let's take a look and see. Let's go my next marker over. Let's take a look at someone who did the second Passover. And did this right, okay? And this is interesting. So we're going to read 2 Chronicles 30. This is about King Hezekiah, one of the few good kings of Israel, and he's going to reinstitute the Passover. Let's see how this went. 2 Chronicles 30. Now Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah and wrote letters, all Israel and Judah. Quick history lesson for those that don't know. Israel is not just Israel. When you read your Bible, there's the house of Israel, which is the northern kingdom, centered around Samaria up in Ephraim. That is the northern 10 tribes that split under King Jeroboam, who we're going to read about here in a minute. And the southern kingdom of Judah, centered around Jerusalem, 2 tribes that were centered around, that follow King Rehoboam. This happened after King Solomon passed away, this split, okay? So he's writing to both. Okay, Israel used to be unified. They haven't been in a long time. Hezekiah is aware of that. So Hezekiah sent to all Israel and Judah and wrote letters also to Ephraim and to Manasseh up in the north, that they should come to the house of Yahweh at Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover to Yahweh, the God of Israel. Now, when we read about Jeroboam here in a minute, I wanted to save the bad for later to highlight this. I could have read it first chronologically and maybe it would have made more sense. But under Jeroboam, he moved the center of worship for the northern kingdom away from Jerusalem. And he set up 2 golden calves, one at the far northern extremity of the kingdom in Dan, and the other one at the far southern extremity of the kingdom in Bethel. And he basically said, you guys don't have to go all the way down to Jerusalem, just stay up here, you know? So appealing to convenience. So this has been the status quo for quite a good many generations. The northern kingdom worshipped in the north, and the southern kingdom worshipped in the south. This is why this is such a big deal, that Hezekiah is inviting the northern kingdom down to Jerusalem, knowing that history. For the king and his princes and all the assembly, verse 2, in Jerusalem, had decided to celebrate the Passover in the 2nd month. Why? Because they were defiled by a dead body, or they were on a long journey? No, since they could not celebrate it at that time because the priests had not consecrated themselves in sufficient numbers, nor had the people been gathered to Jerusalem. Okay, so there's not enough people in Jerusalem. He just decided to do this like a month ago. He already missed first Passover. It's a timing thing. See, because Hezekiah had a heart to just, this is the thing. If he wanted to do it right, which we're going to get into this language later about how he did it otherwise than prescribed, if he wanted to do it right, he could have said, hey, look, we're not ready. We're not set up to do this right now in the first month. Let's just sit tight, and we'll wait until next year, and then we'll do it right. But no. Hezekiah wants to strike while the iron's hot. He wants to strike while the heart of the people are ready. So he says, you know what? Second Passover's coming up. Let's give it a go. But it doesn't meet the requirements that we just read in Numbers. Okay? So you don't have enough priests to do the sacrifices, which, by the way, the priests are not required to sacrifice the lamb. Again, that was kind of an issue of convenience. The average person is not a butcher. The average person doesn't know how to dress a lamb. If you've ever done one for the first time, it's not easy. So you bring it to the professional butchers of the community, the Levites, let them take care of it. It's common sense. Anyway, verse 4, thus the thing was right in the sight of the king and all the assembly. So they established a decree to circulate the proclamation throughout all Israel, from Beersheba even to Dan, that they should come to celebrate the Passover to Yahweh, the God of Israel, at Jerusalem, for they had not celebrated it in great numbers as it was prescribed. The couriers went throughout all Israel and Judah with the letters from the hand. Now, let's pause a moment. As it was prescribed. They had not celebrated it in great numbers as it was prescribed. Grammatically, in English, I can interpret that 2 ways. It's prescribed to celebrate it in great numbers, or it's prescribed to do it a certain way, and only a few people had done it that way. That's the option I lean to. Okay? The couriers went throughout all Israel and Judah with the letters from the hand of the king and his princes, even according to the command of the king, saying, O sons of Israel, return to Yahweh, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, that he may return to those of you who escaped and are left from the hand of the kings of Assyria. Do not be like your fathers and your brothers, who were unfaithful to Yahweh, the God of their fathers, so that he made them a horror, as you see. Now do not stiffen your neck like your fathers, but yield to Yahweh, and enter his sanctuary, which he has consecrated forever. And serve Yahweh your Elohim, that his burning anger may turn away from you. For if you return to Yahweh, your brothers and your sons will find compassion before those who led them captive, and will return to this land. For Yahweh your Elohim is gracious and compassionate, and will not turn his face away from you if you return to him. So the couriers passed from city to city through the country of Ephraim and Manasseh, and as far as Zebulun, but they laughed them to scorn and mocked them. Nevertheless, some men of Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. The hand of Elohim was also on Judah to give them one heart to do what the king and the princes commanded by the word of Yahweh. Verse 13. Now many people were gathered at Jerusalem to celebrate the feast of unleavened bread in the 2nd month, a very great assembly. They arose and removed the altars which were in Jerusalem. They also removed all the incense altars and cast them into the brook Kidron. Then they slaughtered the Passover on the 14th of the second month, and the priests and Levites were ashamed of themselves and consecrated themselves and brought burnt offerings to the house of Yahweh. They stood at their stations after their custom according to the law of Moses, the man of Elohim. The priests sprinkled the blood which they received from the hand of the Levites. For there were many in the assembly who had not consecrated themselves. Therefore the Levites were over the slaughter of the Passover lambs for everyone who was unclean, in order to consecrate them to Yahweh. Now think about this. I mentioned this earlier. Your average person like me and you, a lot of them were unclean, so they couldn't sacrifice their own Passover lamb. So they went to the Levites who were clean. The Levites did that for them. So if you're of the opinion that you can't do a Passover lamb because you don't have a Levite there to do it for you, these people would beg to differ. Verse 18, for a multitude of the people, even many from Ephraim and Manasseh, Issachar and Zebulun, had not purified themselves, yet they ate the Passover otherwise than prescribed. For Hezekiah prayed for them, saying, may the good Yahweh pardon everyone who prepares his heart to seek Elohim, Yahweh, the God of his fathers, though not according to the purification rules of the sanctuary. So Yahweh heard Hezekiah and healed the people. The sons of Israel present in Jerusalem celebrated the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 days with great joy, and the Levites and the priests praised Yahweh day after day with loud instruments to Yahweh. Verse 22, then Hezekiah spoke encouragingly to all the Levites who showed good insight in the things of Yahweh. So they ate for the appointed 7 days, sacrificing peace offerings and giving thanks to Yahweh, God of their fathers. Then the whole assembly decided to celebrate the feast another 7 days. So they celebrated the feast 7 days with joy. So 14 days. For Hezekiah, king of Judah, had contributed to the assembly 1,000 bulls and 7,000 sheep, and the princes had contributed to the assembly 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep, and a large number of priests consecrated themselves. All the assembly of Judah rejoiced, and the priests and Levites and all the assembly that came from Israel, both the sojourners who came from the land of Israel and those living in Judah. So there was great joy in Jerusalem, because there was nothing like this in Jerusalem since the days of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. How sad. This should have been a yearly thing. But yet we're so much holier than they are, right? Then the Levitical priests arose and blessed the people, and their voice was heard, and their prayer came to his holy dwelling place, to heaven. If my people, right? Okay, so what do we have here? They can't do the first Passover because they're too late. There aren't enough priests consecrated to be able to offer the sacrifices. The people themselves, a lot of them are not consecrated. They're all unclean. Okay? It doesn't say why. It just says they're unclean. Now, if they were unclean because of a dead body at the first Passover, they would have reason to do the second Passover in the second month. But it doesn't say they were. It could have been anything. Leprosy, marital relations, I mean, anything. Wounds, who knows? Right? So they weren't ready. So instead of waiting until the next year, Hezekiah says, let's go ahead and just do it in the second month. Okay, so they did. And then on top of that, they did it another week. So we've got some things here, right? So when we talk about double dipping, did they double dip? No, they didn't. They knew that they should have kept Passover in the first month. They wanted to, but they weren't really able to, corporately. So they waited until the second month. They didn't double dip. Now, did they meet the criteria for keeping it in the second month according to what we read in Numbers? No, they didn't. And that's why Hezekiah prayed that Yahweh would accept it and make exception for this. And it says that he did. Why? Because their hearts were the deciding factor. Now, if we just think logically, if their hearts had not been ready, and they were just going through the motions, going rote, you know, that whole thing, do you think he would have allowed it? I'm tending to think no. Our hearts, our motivation for doing things is just as important, if not more important, than the things we actually do. This is what the Pharisees had such a hard time understanding, apparently. You're doing the stuff, but you're not doing it for the right reasons. You might as well not even be doing stuff. Right? Okay. So now we're going to look at person. So these are people, I talked about the calendar earlier, right? These are people that knew when Passover was. Passover was in the first month, as they reckoned it that year. They wanted to do it then, but they couldn't, so they did it the second month. Okay? Now we're going to read about somebody who knew when the feast was supposed to be and chose to do it at a time when it's not supposed to be. Now we're going to go back to 1 Kings, and we're going to read from starting in verse 1 Kings chapter 12, starting in verse 16. This is what I alluded to earlier with the split. When all Israel saw that the king, King Rehoboam, Solomon's son, did not listen to them, the people answered the king, because what had happened? Solomon died, and he had Solomon's counselors who were wise, and he had his buddies, he had his bros. And he wanted to know like what he should do, because Solomon had this labor tax on the people and this financial tax on the people that was pretty heavy. And he went for counsel. Solomon's people said, look, Solomon was pretty hard on the people. If you want this people to follow you and to revere you and respect you as their king, you're going to need to lighten their burden. He goes to his bros, and they say, no, man, whatever your dad did, make him look weak. So what does he do? He follows his buddies. Note to youth, following your buddies over your elders is usually a recipe for disaster, because your buddies are just as immature as you are. I used to be that guy. Some might say I still am. Anyway, so the idea here is that the kingdom is split, okay? So when Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion do we have in David? Because he's talking about a descendant of David here, right? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now look after your own house, David. They're throwing down the gauntlet. So Israel departed to their tents. But as for the sons of Israel who lived in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. Then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the forced labor, and all Israel stoned him to death. This is like a rebellion. And King Rehoboam made haste to mount his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. It came about when all Israel heard that Jeroboam had returned, that they sent and called him to the assembly and made him king over all Israel, the northern 10 tribes. None but the tribe of Judah followed the house of David. Now when Rehoboam had come to Jerusalem, he assembled all the house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 chosen men who were warriors to fight against the house of Israel to restore the kingdom to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. But the word of Elohim came to Shemaiah, the man of Elohim, saying, speak to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all the house of Judah, and to Benjamin, and the rest of the people, saying, thus says Yahweh, you must not go up and fight against your relatives, the sons of Israel. Return every man to his house, for this thing has come from me. So they listened to the word of Yahweh, and returned and went their way according to the word of Yahweh. Then Jeroboam, verse 25, built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim, and lived there. And he went out there and built Penuel. Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will return to the house of David. If this people go up to offer sacrifices in the house of Yahweh at Jerusalem, then the heart of this people will return to their master, even to Rehoboam, king of Judah. And they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So he's thinking politically here, right? So the king consulted and made 2 golden calves, and he said to them, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold your gods, O Israel, that brought you up from the land of Egypt. Because Aaron didn't get in trouble for that ever, right? Let's repeat history because we're so genius level. Okay. But we would do better, right? Because we're so much more spiritual. Okay. Verse 29, he set one in Bethel and the other he put in Dan. Now this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. And he made houses on high places and made priests from among all the people who were not the sons of Levi. Jeroboam instituted a feast in the 8th month, on the 15th day of the month, like the feast which is in Judah. And he went up to the altar. Thus he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves which he had made. And he stationed in Bethel the priests in the high places which he had made. Then he went up to the altar which he made in Bethel on the 15th day of the 8th month, even in the month which he had devised in his own heart. And he instituted a feast for the sons of Israel, and went up to burn incense. So what has he done here? He's moved the center of worship away from Jerusalem. Okay? And on top of that, he basically made a second Feast of Tabernacles in the 8th month. Now, if we had something where he said, well, I know that, they're saying that, it's the 7th month, they're off on the calendar. So we're just going to do it again. We're keeping the calendar a month later. In other words, so Judah, Rehoboam, the southern kingdom, is keeping Sukkot in what they think is the 7th month. And Jeroboam in the northern kingdom, because he has a different understanding of the calendar, is also keeping the feast in what he thinks is the 7th month. Okay? Now, with our calendar issues, I personally have no issue with that. However you deem the calendar, and you believe the calendar is correct, we're doing the best we can with this whole calendar thing. If you think it's the 7th month, and you do the feast in the 7th month, power to you, rock on. The problem comes when we don't do that. When we believe the calendar is a certain way, and we keep the calendar, we keep the feast, like, let's say this, we keep tabernacles in the 7th month. And then our buddies who are on a different calendar are keeping it a month later in what they believe this is 7th month, but we believe that's the 8th month. If we go and keep the feast again in what we believe is the 8th month, even though our motivations are different, functionally it's kind of like this. And this is my point. There is a danger in double dipping. Okay? There's no provision in the scriptures to do the feasts a second time in another month on the calendar that you're keeping. Now, my wife and I, my family, when we were younger, we had a year, we kept Passover twice. Okay? There's a lot of times there's a division. We were on the barley calendar at the time. Some people thought it was ready in March. Some people thought it was ready in April. Okay? Initially, we went with the March crowd. So we kept Passover in the early calendar, right? After we did that, we second guessed and we thought, no, I don't know. I don't think they were right. I think that this second group is right. So we, in midstream, switched over to the later calendar. Okay? Now, we kept Passover again because we believed that we were doing it in the first month. Now, both times when we kept the Passover, at that moment, we sincerely believed we were keeping it in the first month of the year. When we kept it a month later, or that second time, we weren't thinking, oh, we kept Passover the first time and it was so fun. Let's do it again. No, because you don't get to do it for that reason in the second month. Now, there are some people, we're not the only ones, this happens. Now, I think Yahweh is merciful, and when a situation like that does happen, he looks at our heart, he looks at our motivations. We're not intending to do it twice, just for fun. And if you look at the fact that Hezekiah extended the Feast of Unleavened Bread another week, okay, they already did it. Basically, they just didn't go home. That's not the same as like doing it again at a later date. Okay? So this is where I think that the whole second Passover double dipping thing, we kind of need to slow down and think about it. Yes, the feasts are fun. I love Yahweh's holy days, but that's the thing. They're holy days. The more you do something holy, the less holy it gets, right? This is why the Sabbath is one day a week. If the Sabbath is every day of the week, it's not holy anymore. It's common now, right? It's just like all the other days of the week. They're all the same. For it to be holy, it has to have an exclusivity to it. It has to have a uniqueness. It has to have a limited scope. This is why things that are rare have more value than things that are not rare. Thinking of minerals and such, right? Money, currency, has more value when there's less of it. Deflation versus less value when there's more of it. Inflation. We can get our brains around this. So for people that just like to feast hop and do this whole thing where they're just like, yeah, I'm going to do Passover here and then I'm going to go do it here. And then when we get into the whole nuances of the calendar, we don't just have like, you know, an early and a later, like a month apart. You've got, when does the month start? You've got conjunction, sliver, local Jerusalem. You know, for every month, there's potentially 3 months it could start on, which means for every month, there's 3 potential days you could keep the Passover, depending on how you reckon when that month started. I've encountered people over the years who will do that. They'll go to Passover one night with one group, and the very next night, go do Passover with another group. In my opinion, and this could be a minority, I don't know. In my opinion, we should not be doing that. In my opinion, doing that cheapens the holiness of these special occasions that Yahweh has pulled out of time and made special for his people. If we're going to do Second Passover, it needs to be because we could not keep the first Passover in the first month. Not because we want to do Passover twice, because it's so fun. I know it's great to have family over and friends and to do the Passover meal and then to get on, sit around and watch Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner and Edward G. Robinson. That's fun. But they're not intended to be fun. They're intended to be holy. So this is where I'm making my position firm over this. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Whatever calendar you settle on, if you believe that calendar is true, and you keep the Passover, or really any other holiday according to that calendar, doing it multiple times is double dipping, and we're violating the holiness of these days. Now I realize not everybody has the same position on the calendars that I do. My position on the calendars is that every single biblical calendar has pros and has cons. They have strengths, they have weaknesses. They have places where they work, places where they don't. I don't believe any of them are 100% accurate. My position is that the function of the calendar trumps the form of the calendar. The function of the calendar is for Yahweh's people to come together to worship him. It's hard to come together to worship him if we're all on different calendars. I advocate your local tribe, your local congregation, your local fellowship, your local church. Pick a calendar that you're all going to be on, even if it's not the one you like. I'm intentionally keeping the feast on a calendar that I don't like, on purpose. Okay? Like, for a reason. Because I think that the function of the calendar supersedes the form of the calendar. I believe 100% that we will never have doctrinal unity unless we first focus on unity of purpose. If we can get together in unity of purpose and live in that space long enough, I believe that we will eventually start to obtain unity of doctrine. But if we focus on unity of doctrine as the primary, we will never get to unity of purpose. So this is where each family has a choice to make. If your family's cool with double dipping and you think it's just this big fun thing, nothing I can really do to stop you. I'm not going to judge you. I can tell you that I disagree with that approach very strongly. And I didn't always. This is the thing. 10 years ago, I would not have had such a strong position against double dipping. But I've seen over the years, more and more people getting into this mindset, and in my opinion, it's a detriment to our corporate walk. It's a detriment to us collectively. It's cheapening the whole thing. It's diluting the holiness that we're striving to attain. So, do the feast, pick a calendar, whatever calendar that is, even if it's one you don't like, and you're doing it just for the sake of getting together with your local fellowship, do the feast once, and only once. I can't say that strongly enough. You don't get to do Second Passover unless you are unclean because of a dead person, or you're on a long journey, presumably because of that. Now, if these are things that are holy to you, and you know that Passover is coming up, don't plan a vacation on first Passover. You know it's coming. It's not a surprise. Don't plan a family vacation for Passover and then say, well, it's okay. I can just do it second Passover. No, we don't get to do that. When we look at Hezekiah, he was in a unique situation. He couldn't do it the first month for ritual purity purposes. That's not in compliance with Numbers 9. But he got approval from Yahweh. And this is where I keep going back to. For the people that say, we can't keep the feast in modern times because we can't do them perfectly, talk to Hezekiah. Hezekiah couldn't do it perfectly. Like I said earlier, he could have waited a whole year and then done it right, but he didn't. Why? Because of the heart. I don't mean like the emotion. In Hebraic thinking, heart is like your mind. It's like your will. It's what drives you. It's your unique individual sense of purpose. Deep down inside of them, they wanted to live in accordance with Yahweh's commandments. They were tired of the status quo. The status quo was broken. They wanted to break that cycle. When somebody's heart is there, you act. You don't wait. Hezekiah knew that. That's why he was a good king. Anyway, so I'm going to leave it at that. If anybody has any questions or would like to have discussion, I'm open to it. I'm not going to be this hard, super dogmatic guy where like, oh, we can't be friends or fellowship if you double dip. I know a lot of people that do that. I would shrink my circle down quite a bit if I were to do that. I'm putting this out there for consideration. How holy are these days? How much do we value that holiness? Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Good night, everyone. Yahweh bless.